Good evening, everyone. I would like to officially welcome you today on behalf of Academic Association of Faculty of Architecture of Warsaw University of Technology. It's a pleasure to have everyone here for our next lecture. We have been organizing lectures for a few years now at the Faculty of Architecture, and our goal is to promote and spread the multitude of views on design process and philosophies where theory meets practice and practice poses inherent complexities. This is the third time we are doing this online, so we are pleased to have you with us today. Of course, our lectures wouldn't be the same without our media partners that help us spread the knowledge about our event, for what we are very grateful. It also wouldn't be the same without our patrons on Patronite. If you would like to support our activities yourself, then we will be honored if you consider becoming one of our patrons on Patronite. The link where you can do it will be put in the description of the stream. Today, we'll take a look at the work of A-Architects, a Finnish architecture practice you might know among others from the Audi Library projects in Helsinki. We have with us today Antti Nousjoki, a co-founder, partner, and CEO of A-Architects. He's going to share with us knowledge from the 20 years of professional experience. Antti has a particular interest in library design and enjoys both of technical and creative aspects of architecture. Tonight, he's going to tell us more about their current and upcoming projects, and he's going to make a case for a kind of an optimistic architecture. As an internationally well-known practice based in Helsinki, A seeks fresh angles, flowing forms, and surprising solutions. They prefer trust in beauty achieved by combining the intuitive and analytical, the practical and extravagant, and the rational and irrational aspects. The whole story started with their first project, a performing arts center in Norway. I believe back then they hadn't even started a proper office yet. The team of 4 that later became A had done what most architects can only dream of. They won a cultural landmark which enabled them to conquer the world. Later on their professional career, they have designed major public buildings in Finland and abroad. They have taught architecture in Finland and many prestigious universities around the world. Their latest achievements include not one, but 2 won competitions for Estonian Business School campus in Tallinn and new multifunctional learning center of the Lumiere University in Lyon. Moreover, in 2020, they have received the first detail prize, and in 2019, they won International Urban Project Award and were shortlisted for the 5th time to Mies Award. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Artur Jerzy from the Faculty of Architecture.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So since the Faculty of Architecture is a partner of the whole, not only this event, but the whole program, we are proud of it, that our students are doing it. And I'm here on behalf of our Dean, Mr. Koszewski, who couldn't join us today. But he's not only a dean now, but he was a mentor of the whole program since the very beginning. So I think that he is super proud of all of you. And also it's a great pleasure and honor for us to see you, Antti Nousjoki, here in Warsaw, I guess, online, of course, but still I feel like I'm in Warsaw, so in Warsaw. And it's great to have you here. And even in Alicia's introduction, there were few words about enjoyment of solving architectural problems, of some architecture that can be positive. And I believe that it's all kind of also almost philosophical approach, as philosophy as a pursuit of happiness or pursuit of good life and about good society. And I know that within your practice, all those elements about society and aesthetics, beauty, you try to combine all of them within your projects. So it's great to now be able to listen to you. How can we do this to not just solve problems, but derive pleasure from it and have enjoyment about that. So, so the floor definitely is yours today.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Yeah, from Helsinki, I must confess, but doesn't really matter where we are anymore, right? So I think I'll definitely in next 1 hour try to make a case for an optimistic architecture, and that's what we try to do with Ala, our team in Helsinki. We're an office of about 50 architects working in downtown Helsinki in an old tennis hall. Well, now most of us are working from home at the moment, but looking forward to getting back to the tennis hall as soon as possible. And yeah, working both with both projects in Finland and also increasingly internationally. And I think before I go into kind of presenting our work, I want to kind of talk a little bit about what's happening right now. And Aldo Rossi, kind of Italian intellectual and architect, artist, has always been a fascinating figure in the history of architecture. And just, you know, instead of doing a lecture of his work, I can just let artificial intelligence from Palo Alto to kind of select, you know, present him. When I started studying architecture in 1995 and then kind of got into the profession around the kind of change of the millennium, I think Aldo Rossi was the least fashionable, the kind of strangest architecture you could think of, and it was kind of incomprehensible to me. Why would anybody, you know, want to build something like this? And it took me a long time because of this kind of contrast between what was fashionable at the time and then what his work, which wasn't, all of it wasn't really that old. That took me a long time to actually start to appreciate and understand him. And yeah, 20 years or so. And just when I kind of feel that I started to understand him, this kind of mythical figure from the past, I'm starting to also now understand that what a lot of construction industry is doing is getting closer and closer to Mr. Rossi's work. So if we just Google brick facade, and even better if we Google like a grid brick facade, we can see that more and more in the kind of last maybe 10 to and last 5 years, architecture has been kind of coming back to this heavy symmetrical, almost like mausoleumic, or like cemetery-like qualities that we are, as a profession, in a way escaping the kind of willingness to push forward and kind of push for new technologies and be kind of, you know, experimental and outrageous, understandably in a way because of like the climate crisis and several like challenges that our societies are facing, and the kind of the crisis that the planet is facing. We're kind of I feel that architecture is kind of retreating to trying to kind of become almost like automated in a way, that I see that a lot of younger colleagues are kind of unwilling to make what they feel are like too grand design statements, and they feel that work from offices like us is you know, this kind of identity architecture, this wow architecture is one of these negative terms that's sometimes associated with it, and that there's more socially and ecologically responsible architecture by kind of in a way rejecting architecture and kind of going into this almost auto-generated, very often, at least in Finland now, like brick facade grid patterns, behind which, you know, any function can happen. This is now a Google search for one of the like big new residential area developments in Old Harbor, close to downtown Helsinki. And you know, Aldo Rossi and the kind of rejection of in a way, strong futuristic architecture and this kind of what I feel is kind of slightly moralistic false modesty is resulting in this kind of very heavy and very repetitive brick city of brick, where these buildings are not, you know, handcrafted by bricklayers like they used to be. It's a huge scale of industrial production that we're talking about here. Even in the small city of Helsinki, this one extension of Helsinki is in total 1 million square meters of new construction, and this is just a tiny bit of what's happening in Europe overall, and let alone the kind of entire globe. So it's of course true that like it's stupid to pretend this. By the way, this is our project. I didn't know that it's here. That's not brick, as you can see. Obviously the interesting project in this Google search. So what I'm saying is that it's stupid as an architect to pretend that every project is like an individual that can start from zero and go anywhere. I mean, if you look at the whole building industry and realize that every architecture office, the good ones and the bad ones, big ones and small ones, and inspired and not so inspired ones, we're all part of the kind of global construction industry, and what we are doing is kind of being part of a kind of machinery that works on a gigantic scale, and obviously is such a big part of human activity on this planet that we absolutely have to take full responsibility with the kind of what we do. But it's I think it's a quite common fault with young architects and students. That's why I wanted to kind of start with this, is to kind of somehow think that like a normal simple project is a kind of somehow separated from the rest of the context. That it's not separated, and but just by looking at this kind of global trends and thinking about Aldo Rossi's work, and then what's everybody's designing here, what are the ways to win competitions, it's not really, in a way we are now working globally on one kind of playing field. But there's many ways to work on it, and I think now that we are allies, our office is about 16 years old now, so like an old teenager. We are not the emerging architecture studio anymore. There's like new generations of younger offices coming behind. What I want to say is that we are kind of feeling that what we want to do is more, in a way, optimistic and maybe more experimental in some ways than what the kind of younger architects are wanting to do or are doing, at least in Helsinki at the moment. And I find that that's strange, at the kind of and I'm not perfectly fine with it. I think kind of in a way reducing architecture in a way to this you know, brick grid systems and the kind of and then the very strong ecological moralistic statements that anything besides this brick grid is unacceptable and it's a waste of resources and it's just trying to build your own identity and so on. I don't think it's true. I think what we instead should be looking at is to kind of work within the construction industry by kind of looking at what are the opportunities for each particular project and being realistic about what they are, but then really trying to kind of push to utilize those opportunities, both to kind of course, benefit the client and the community that the building is serving, but also then to kind of try to create contrasts and surprises and something that's not just repeating the current trend or kind of reducing to the kind of common denominator of what's in a way puristically acceptable. I find the kind of current architecture trends to be kind of strangely primitive and then, you know, fake in many ways because the kind of buildings are built with kind of quite sophisticated technologies and large industrial systems, and then they're made to look like that they were built by kind of old-fashioned bricklayers. And a brick itself, I think, is a good symbol of that. It used to be a very advanced material when everything was done by hand. Now it's a kind of nuisance for this sophisticated industrial building systems where we have this kind of relic from the past that they have to somehow fit into their production systems. And the new brick buildings, when you look at them from close, they are not solid on beautifully made on site. It's a kind of thin layer covering what is an entirely different building frame system and so on. So one of the things that we've been kind of quite seriously discussing here at Ala is that we try not to do that. We try to kind of stay away from this, in a way, nostalgia. That's a big thing in the world, and we try to stay on this path that we've kind of started 15 years together with Juho here in the middle and Samuli here on the left, and I'm on the right. So we are the three architect partners running the office. And we started by winning, like was nicely told in the introduction, a big cultural project in Kristiansand. This is, I don't feel it's an old building. It was completed in 2012. It's not even 10 years old, but I'm not going to talk too much about this project, but I think this really is a kind of manifestation what we wanted to do, why we wanted to start an office, and what we are kind of trying to continue to do. We're not trying to repeat this project, but I think what we feel like is that we want to stay on this path, and in a way, we'll be here even in 20 years, still trying to build like experimental structures, use a lot of steel to do kind of hovering buildings, and even if the kind of brick grid is maybe then surrounding all of us, hopefully not. And of course, I mean, trends change, but I think the kind of somehow I feel that there's a strong move also from within architectural communities to kind of reduce the kind of tools that we have available, reduce the forms and the kind of scope of expression. So this is a cultural center. As you can see, it's sitting in an harbor area that when the building opened, and even now is very much still like a harbor. There's some containers. It's a kind of flat field of asphalt, a very object-like building where 4 different performance venues are located side by side, and then the underbellies of the auditoriums are kind of dramatized by this curving oak timber wall, which then underneath the oak wall is the lobby, the foyer, which is very much part of the harbor environment outside, and then when you go through the curving timber wall shaped by the auditoriums, you go into each particular performance. So it's very object-like, exaggerated, in a way abstract, but also very literal building, designed and built partially with quite sophisticated 3D technology. We worked for the execution of the curving oak wall with a Swiss company called Design to Production, which was one of the pioneers of kind of using the digital models in large-scale manufacturing processes. And there was a nice Norwegian boat building company. It really is like a dream project that you win like a cultural center and then execute it with a boat building company who was able to follow us and Design to Production's 3D models and also the algorithmic models in their production, and to build something that's not a small pavilion, but it's a significant cultural center. There's a nice concert hall inside this kind of dark acoustic cave with then this timber details for the orchestra and the audience. And there's boats around it in a way, the kind of large-scale abstractness of the building works quite beautifully with the different fascinating boats coming in and out of the Kristiansand harbor. It's a building very much born out of also the Norwegian economic context, the kind of city of 80,000 people is willing and able to invest into such a such a cultural statement, and we've tried to do something that is not trying to be like a small town cultural center, but it's also not trying to be the Sydney Opera House. It tries to be a kind of large factory that produces performances and which creates through its contents this kind of interesting public space that is for anybody in the city, and any visitor can just drop by in the lobby, regardless of if you're going into the show or not. And then if you go into the performance, then you have to go through the timber wall and become like an audience member. It's a fascinating project to get this built, and I think the kind of in a way has shaped our architectural thinking and skill set and the way our office works a lot. So right around the time when Kilden was completed in 2012, then the city of Helsinki announced the open design competition for the new central library, new downtown branch of the city library network of 35 libraries in all parts of Helsinki metropolitan area. But what was missing was like a bigger contemporary library building right in the heart of the city, because in the old parts of the city, the libraries that were there were old and charming old buildings, very much in use, very much built around like 19th century idea of library as this kind of book temple. And nobody wants to change those buildings, and they are well liked. But then the library organization has changed with the society, and Helsinki has also changed. Helsinki, up until the 1980s, used to be a very what's the right word? Soviet-like maybe city. Is that it obviously we were not, Russia, but very close to it. And in 1980s, yeah, okay, we had like free market economy to a certain extent, but we didn't really have the kind of choice of urban life that maybe the Western Europe in even 1980s had. And then only in like 1990s, Helsinki started to open up more, to the streets, to the plazas. The restaurants became more fun, and the kind of rules about serving alcohol became more relaxed. And people started to realize that instead of just working in the city and escaping to the countryside at any given opportunity, it was actually quite fun to stay in the city, as well, at least in the summer weekends, and organize festivals, go to concerts, create maybe more experimental art groups, and this urban culture really. There's been, of course, certain parts of that throughout the history of the city, but it's really the kind of contemporary, and I think global level urban culture is a relatively new thing in Helsinki. And then the kind of library, in a way, when that Helsinki became a really fun and great city in like early 90s, and from that on, I think one of the kind of key institutions in our city is the city library network, and they started to talk about that, okay, we would maybe want to build a new building, a new kind of building that complements the old building network that we have, and that would be very much in downtown, and it would kind of tap into the downtown cultural buzz and life and kind of activities, all of these things that have been on hold for 1 year now already, but they are not hopefully permanently gone. And this was the starting point for the Helsinki City Library. So you can see this is an aerial photograph of downtown Helsinki. We're kind of on this peninsula facing the Baltic Sea. Tallinn is on the other side of this bay, only 60 kilometers away. So Helsinki and Tallinn are almost these twin cities. And there's a central park in Helsinki, which ends up here with the Eliel Saarinen designed railway station. There's the Kiasma Contemporary Art Museum by Stephen Hall, some other public buildings, some Alvar-Aalto buildings. And then you can see the timber facade and the kind of white box on top of it and the cantilevering balcony. That's our library. So it's very much in the kind of southern tip of Helsinki Central Park, extending into the city. And the starting point was what I described, this kind of, in a way, cultural paradigm shift of life in Helsinki. We are learning, the Finnish people learning how to use the city center as a kind of tool not only for working and shopping, but also for like enjoyment of life. So the kind of the idea with the library simply is that we built 3 landscapes, 3 distinctively different landscapes on top of each other, and all of these 3 landscapes have a different relationship with the heart and the urban life of Helsinki. So the ground floor is a direct extension of the plaza in front, the streets around. It's kind of indoor version of the kind of busy public space in the city. And the top level is a kind of, is right in the heart of Helsinki, but you have a little bit longer view. You're not seeing the construction sites or the snow or the traffic noise or anything like that. The immediate surroundings, you're kind of elevated above it into this bigger landscape of like the skylines. You see like 10,000 windows with lights when you're in the top floor. So it's very accessible, but also a little bit separated from the noise of the city. And then separating these 2 open levels is the kind of middle floor where you can see this striped window with some lights, which is basically a solid volume between these 2 open volumes. And that's where the individual rooms and kind of specific functions and also more private spaces of the building are located. So 3 different places to go right in the heart of the city, and then combinations with these 2. Within these 3. This building was opened in 2018 Christmas time, and just looking at the statistics, the visitors in the building in 2019 were 2.8 million people, which in a city of 650,000 people is obviously pretty good. This is the kind of visitor statistic monthly, and you can see that there are some intensive peaks. There's maybe been a big event in the library or some famous author or a politician has visited, but also that is kind of quite consistent week to week, day to day. Some short closing periods during the summer, some maintenance and so on. But 2.8 million people in a library, that means that it's not a typical library. It's not something where a place to kind of borrow books. It's more like a really big part of the kind of cultural and functional lifestyle infrastructure of downtown Helsinki. So you can see how the 3 levels communicate with the buildings around. One of the important buildings that the library forms a relationship is the Finnish Parliament. This quite serious building that's facing the library over this series of public spaces, and then there's this big plaza in front with a lot of demonstrations and political events, celebrations, festivals, all kinds of things happen. So there's a nice dialogue between the kind of very contemporary library and very old-fashioned parliamentary building, where here we have 200 representatives voted by the people, and here we have all the people, thinking about who to vote next and debating it, and it's like really that kind of democracy. The kind of enlightened, serious citizens using their tool to kind of be even more kind of critical and demanding of the elected representatives. And that's one of the things this building is, but it's many other things. It also is a library in the top level, the kind of peaceful landscape hovering above the city. There are 100,000 books in a collection that's constantly rotated in and out to kind of, there are algorithms to kind of guess what people want to see next in a physical form. So it's not a fixed collection of items, but really something that tries to smartly respond to what the people would want to see next, and also tries to complement what people are reading online and to provide a better curated, more serious, more truthful series of information and also art pieces. of literature. Here you can see the kind of space underneath the canopy that's stretching out over the plaza in front. So a big part of what the library does is it covers part of the outdoor space around, so it creates this informal plaza space underneath it, which then continues to the ground floor below. And you can see the parliamentary building across the plaza, and it's tries to be a kind of friendly and bold, inviting, fun, and also a beautiful building, without trying to necessarily be that seriously fashionable. And it's a far cry from the kind of grid brick seriousness that was also already in this competition. The kind of that, okay, library needs to be this kind of modest temple that's done elegantly and without wasting anything. That was a big theme in the competition proposals. You can also see that the kind of surrounding buildings, a lot of them are contemporary buildings, are heavily built with glass, aluminium, and these things, and that's why one of the reasons why we selected to do the middle floor clad completely in timber, so from all sides, all four facades, the underbelly, so the ceiling of the ground floor, and then the top of the middle floor, so the kind of floor of the third floor, are all built in wood, which is a surprising material choice in such a kind of cultural institution building in downtown Helsinki. Even though we have a lot of forest industry, we are not really great at building large buildings with timber. Smaller buildings, yes, but I think we are still now the Finnish construction industry and society and architects are now trying to learn how to build bigger things with our local timber resources. So the Norwegian project was done with local oak. This is done with local birch trees, so Finnish. The local spruce trees. Finnish traditional construction tree. That if it's well selected from certain growing sites, it's really weather resistant and beautiful material. So in a diagrammatic form, 3 levels. The middle one is solid, and then we kind of manipulated the form of the solid to make it touch the ground in the ends, lift it up a little bit in the ends as well to hide staircases, toilets, and so on, to keep the top level really open as an open landscape. And then also deciding that actually what we can do with this form is that besides cladding the middle part with timber, we can also make that the kind of technical and structural core of the building. So we built the building as a bridge that's spanning over the ground floor to really kind of metaphorically permanently cast the kind of diagram in steel and concrete and timber structures, that you cannot add columns or separations in the ground floor, and you cannot remove the columns and separations in the middle floor. And then the top level has to be light because it's sitting on this 100-meter span bridge. So it's really the kind of 3 different levels and conditions are not only their relationships to the ground plane, but also their physical relationships with the building frame and the whole kind of the bones, the kind of really what the building physically is. The frame is the one that defines these 3 levels as distinctive and permanently different. There's a interesting public toilet in the ground floor or in the basement, but then all the other public facilities start from the ground floor. So this is the ground floor which the bridge steel bridge is spanning over. It's a space where you can just kind of pop in and out. You can have large meetings of large groups, events in a cinema or this multi-purpose hall. There's a restaurant, and then of course the info desk, a lot of pop-up exhibitions and open public space. You can see the kind of timber-clad second floor spanning over the open space. No columns, no structures limiting what can happen here. Sometimes it's empty, sometimes it's the indoor part of a festival happening in the plaza outside. the idea is that it's every day a little bit different. You can walk through it on your daily commute and learn something new about what's happening in the city, what the library is doing, what books are out, or just maybe have a chat with the librarian, ask them something, or check out a book, whatever you want to do. It's kind of you're almost not even in the building when it's so easy to kind of get in and out of this. And it's also very inviting in terms of security and control. There are no metal detectors, there are no visible security guards, you don't need to have a library card or any identification to get in, and you're not being treated as a potential nuisance, but everybody really is welcome and welcome to use the building the way they want to use it. So there's a lot of people are working from this building, organizing business meetings and all kinds of events. So it's really like a community center, but right in the heart of the city. This is the multi-purpose hall, this time used for like some senior citizens event. And this is the restaurant, which is in the northern end of the ground floor under the timber shape. And then there's a cinema showing the National Film Archive series, a lot of great Polish films, of course, there. But so the kind of non-commercial art house cinema run by the Finnish government also decided to relocate into this building. It really complements the kind of rest of the functionality nicely. Then going to the middle floor, and like I said, we needed one level of rooms, a kind of sequence of spaces for individual functions and events where allow people to do things that would otherwise disturb other people. Then they can get a room in the middle floor. So there's an area called the Urban Workshop, which provides the citizens with all kinds of simple tools, from 3D printers to sewing machines to large-scale printers, and you can use them for fun or for serious reasons. You can do your homework or just your handcraft assignments here, or just use the free computers and online access. And you can see from this image that the middle floor is really kind of being almost on the other side of the building, in a way, this kind of almost like a technical plant room in a way. So there's the steel bridge structure and then the parallel steel trusses that are clad with Finnish birch to kind of make them more touchable and nice. And then because of the kind of facade cantilever, it's kind of making this curving, swooping move in the facade of the building underneath the balcony. That reduces part of this floor into these steps, which we then just built following the geometry. And then it's not really it wasn't in the room program. It's not a kind of in a very systematic utilitarian architecture where you just kind of list the rooms and give the sizes and build them as efficiently and cheaply as you can. You never end up with spaces like this. But instead of just walling this space off, we decided that, okay, let's build this series of platforms or big steps there. And there's always people sitting there and using that space also in various ways. So this kind of cavernous and sometimes quite randomly beautiful meetings of structures, and the spaces between the structures are inhabited by then smaller functions. There's rooms for computer games, completely silent rooms, so you can see the double glass wall, like preventing transfer of noise. And this is the only room where you're not allowed to make any noise. And then on the steps and between the columns in darker and more bright areas, there's groups of kids and individual kids and people of all ages and backgrounds, very peacefully side by side, kind of doing their thing. So it's a lot of people are in downtown Helsinki for a couple of hours. They have some extra time, so instead of going to the local Starbucks, they can come here to this kind of landscape of opportunities. And really, the middle floor is the kind of relaxed, in a way, like almost the unofficial part of these 3 levels. And with then tools and also this kind of more relaxed workshop-like aesthetics, which allows the librarians and the citizens to also bring in new functions, that everything, you don't have to hire all the wires, and you can bring new monitors and new, these are the social gaming rooms. So these are places where you can come to play video games with your friends. This is one of the really popular parts of the library. And inside these brown walls, as you can guess from the shapes, the cladding, there are some music studios which you can also borrow or book and record an album, or just learn how to use the studio equipment provided by the city. None of the equipment is strictly professional. It's high quality, but it's for like the idea is to provide environment for amateur, non-commercial use. But it's not against the rules to do serious business or make money also in the building, but the kind of aim is to kind of that everything is not your profession, that you maybe work for something else, but then in the library you can try other things, and not everything has to be so perfectly serious. There's also a kitchen in the library that anybody can borrow, and this is my wife Josetta and his father, who just recently turned 70, and one bit more than a year ago, just right before the COVID started, we organized a small family birthday celebration in the kitchen of the library in the second floor. So you can see the structures, you can see the ventilation, exposed ventilation systems, and then because the site was quite tight, we couldn't waste any space by doing a big atrium or big kind of grand open space to connect the levels. So we only have this kind of quite tight double helix staircase with a hole in the middle connecting all the three floors, and then escalators and elevators as well. So there's kind of three distinctive and quite interesting ways to move between the levels, and really the kind of moment of taking that staircase up to the third level is one of the best parts of the building. So then on top of the wooden volume, we have a kind of quiet traditional library landscape of books, of light, of longer views to the city, and place for not so much social interaction, not so much playing with new devices, but really kind of reading, thinking, contemplation, maybe writing as well, coming up with new things, looking at old and new books or comics or board games. You don't have to be completely silent. There's this kind of certain background hum of 500 people being in one large space, but the ceiling is completely kind of sound absorbing. There's no reflection of sound from there, so the kind of the atmosphere is very quiet. You can look at the parliamentary building from the balcony level. You're on the same level as where the kind of members of the parliament are when they're entering their building, and there's a balcony which during the winter time is closed, but then in the summer it opens. It's a continuous timber deck with a nice bookshelf system and all kinds of seatings, and a continuous glass wall, 360 degrees. All the facades are made of glass with this kind of white dot print, this kind of changing cloud-like pattern that makes the facade white from the outside, and also cuts unnecessary daylight and creates a little bit this kind of internal atmosphere. There's a lot of views, a lot of daylight, but it's also a kind of internal landscape, that the kind of most interesting view is within the space itself. And the ceiling is undulating to create the kind of this landscape of always slightly different conditions. So there's no repetition, there's no strict grid, but any small movement within the space changes the conditions slightly. So you move from slightly higher to slightly lower space, and the kind of light changes a little bit. You kind of the dot pattern of the facade, you see it from a different angle a little bit. And this is actually a kind of experience we get while in nature. That's why the kind of when you're on a sailing boat or in the forest, it's the kind of experience of beauty, in my opinion, comes from the kind of slightly changing conditions constantly. In a boat, the sea is always a little bit changing. You're not in a completely static environment. Same as walking slowly in the forest. In a way, it's consistent, but there's always a little something. The experience is a little bit adjusted by every small movement. So this is what really happens in this top level of the library, and I think that's why Finnish people, I can honestly say, totally love it. So this has been a huge success, as you could see from the visitor numbers and the kind of, yeah, we've gotten some nice prizes. The detail prize was a fantastic thing to get. Of course, it's kind of it's hard to build such a building so well that also the very critical German architecture press focused on details really appreciates also the details. So we are really proud of the kind of high technical quality of this experimental building, and there's a lot of very difficult technical things that we had to solve to get this bridge-like building done. But I still think the highest accolade is that the normal citizens of Helsinki are really in love with this building, and there's this. I feel after talking to hundreds and hundreds of people there that there's a sense of relief that, like, finally in Helsinki, a place of high quality but very conservative buildings, there is something that's like fun and experimental, and something that they have also seen abroad. You know, they've been to New York or they've been to Warsaw and seen seen buildings that kind of create contrasts and create surprises and create these experiences that are not the same as going into your office building, and they are not the same as going into any hotel in the world. And that was what Helsinki was really missing. So I think a lot of people, as funny as it sounds, after the pandemic is over, I think a lot of people come to the library also to kind of be in the space. It really is a kind of besides all the kind of other social and book library functions that this building provides, it also provides an architectural experience that you don't have to have any other reason to go there, but to kind of really to be in a slightly different built environment. And it's kind of tempting, and then you go there, you can maybe find a book or just take a cup of coffee, and also, yeah, it's a great place for people watching, and nobody's questioning your kind of role in hanging out in this building. So I think in many ways it is a kind of a manifestation for almost like a society, or at least like an urban life, where we can, if we have like if the kind of surroundings are well enough set up, and that's what we as architects should do, people are really willing to share things, and you know, very different people are willing to sit and work side by side and kind of also find maybe common ground here. So this is in a world where everything is kind of polarizing, and you're, you know, always somehow it seems like we have to be against something and critical of, if somebody likes it, you can't. I think the overwhelming majority of like normal Helsinki residents really like this building, and that's been a quite that's far beyond what we've done as architects. That's almost like as an observation that somehow this happened, and we all own it and use it together. And any visitor to Helsinki is also more than welcome to go into the building and use it completely. There's no library card required for anything else except borrowing a book. So and then of course now for the last 12 months it's been most of the time during the pandemic the Audi library has been closed. It's sometimes they open it a little bit and then close it back again. So the kind of, this is also all that we kind of lost for 1 year now because of the virus. So really the building is, or the library is, a celebration of this urban life where we can really do things in new groups and meet new people and kind of join up in make surprising connections. All of this which is now forbidden and taboo, and it will take some time for us to kind of get these things back, but the library is there and people remember these sunny images from 2019. And hopefully, maybe not this summer yet, but summer of next year, we'll all get to meet new people and stay in large groups very close to each other in the library. Good. So this, then you can also see in terms of material use and shape, and maybe also the kind of intentions, a lot of similarity and in a way continuity from our first project to then the library. And then there's a third project that in a way we feel that's soon completed, that I'll present now, that we feel is kind of completing this trilogy of large public buildings where timber is not the whole thing. Their story is much more than being timber buildings, and the frame is always steel, because with steel you can really do these fascinating things. Timber is great for cladding, and that's what we do with it. So we are doing one more kind of expressive timber building, and then that series is closed, and this one is an airport building. So this is a map of Helsinki. So the peninsula I was showing you half an hour ago is here in the lower part of the building. And then if you draw this imaginary line, like northern edge of Helsinki, and you can kind of almost think that there's like the similarly sized mirrored urban heart here, which is the Helsinki International Airport, a quite busy airport because our short connection to the big Asian cities. Also, of course, one thing that's completely on hold now, but the airport lives from traffic to in and out of China and Japan, Korea, Thailand. It's a very convenient route, not to advertise it too much, but to fly first to Helsinki, come see the library, and then go to Asia. It's a good plan for 2022. So what we are doing is, of course, not building a completely new airport, but building a major part of a kind of large existing and constantly slightly changing airport complex. So it's I just show these more technical renderings as also an example of how we typically like to work nowadays, that we show clients not only drawings, but we show them like a not presentation or not artistic perspective renderings always, but this kind of more in a way technical sequences that, okay, this is where the arriving passengers are coming in the lower level. And then this is the departing passengers, so the car curb, and there's a train station there. And then this is how the building looks. So basically what we're building is this, what we call the new main building for the airport. So all the kind of passengers starting from next Christmas on, if there are already some passengers at that time, will start their journey by kind of coming into this building, and then through this our building, they will go to the different gates and different terminals of the airport complex. So we're building a new building in front of the current airport complex to give it more space and to give it also a kind of distinctive, dramatic, and easily understandable starting point for the journey. And in order to do this, we're building this large hall with this undulating timber ceiling, again creating this three-dimensional internal landscape. This time not stacking any other functions over it or behind it, but purely almost creating like what feels like a gigantic exterior canopy, even though getting underneath it and through the glass walls, you're obviously in a completely weather protected space, but which is large enough and with natural lights and views through this gigantic skylight, and also the kind of lifted perimeters of the space, that the experience is not being in a kind of separated from the outside world of airports where you don't know if it's day or night. But in here, you're still very much in Finland, very much in Helsinki, and very much part of the kind of day and season you are in. And you kind of meet your friends here. You do kind of your final preparations before becoming a passenger. And then once you're ready and it's the right time, then you go through this blue wall, through the security checks, and then you take on the role of the passenger. Then you're in the generic global world of airports, made of which all more or less look the same. So there's a big functional and emotional need for this project to look different than the kind of generic airport world that it's a portal to. So like this is a moment to kind of see some nature, see some Finnish timber, some Finnish rocks also, and daylight. And it's a place to meet even with a huge group and take a deep breath and then dive into the world of travel. So as you can see from these site photos, we are already in a pretty advanced stage. The timber used in this time is this kind of contours of large CLT-like massive timber plates fixed into this system of timber framed elements and then lifted into place with this hoisting system as it's done here. So you can see that this is it's not handcrafted with small tools, but it's digitally designed and digitally produced in a large factory as a kind of elaborate kit of parts that are then with surgical precision and scheduling assembled on site, while the airport is running all around this building. So here we can see how the kind of finished ceiling looks and how the shapes reveal views and weather and glimpses of daylight deep into this meeting hall. And it's interesting when the kind of also live in this large space, the kind of depending on the direction of light, sometimes the timber really almost loses its color or kind of natural textures, like in this image. It looks almost without any like it all looks to be kind of very abstract in a way. The material reality is sometimes lost, and then the light changes direction a little bit, and then it really looks like and also smells like forest. So this is it's the biggest of the series, and also in a way the most simple. In a way, it's literally is a big roof to meet underneath to kind of check in your bags and then continue the journey. And it's not going to be used for a variety of events like the library. It's not like this friendly downtown alien where you can kind of escape your daily life for 2 hours. It's more part of a part of your journey. But our aim here is to make such a kind of impressive and delightful and surprising part of the journey that it actually, you know, makes the moment of using this building better, and also gives a great impression to people who are leaving or arriving to Finland and Helsinki. And in a way, you're coming to the City of Oodi library through this mega pavilion that's if you recognize architectural shapes, you're kind of you get an idea that okay, there's some consistency here as well. So we're not trying to repeat ourselves, but we're not also trying to make everything look completely different. We try to kind of, and running a studio like what we're doing, this is one of the facades, is a big part of that we've come to realize now in the first 15 years is that we've done hundreds of sketches and dozens of built projects, and they kind of somehow keep adding up. So instead of pretending that every project starts from nothing and we just magically come up with something that's unique and significant and better than the brick grid solution that's readily available from any of the other architecture offices, we've come to realize that actually what we can provide to the clients is in a way design work that's not starting from nothing, but it's based on what our team has done together before, both the kind of unsuccessful, unbuilt projects, the kind of lost competitions. They all contain some design work that's meaningful still. It's in the back of our heads. It's in and we work a lot by having like sketching and comparing the sketches and having conversations and very polite arguments about what's good about this and what's not good about this. So we quite often refer to what we did 5 years ago for this small competition in Norway, or the art museum in Poland had this thing that would have been really nice. And we're not recycling the ideas, but they are in a way the kind of work of getting those or our previous projects on paper and getting them digital models or whatever the format is made of them. It is present in our minds, and it allows us to kind of generate new things and maybe to generate better things, because we have this kind of we have learned through the experience of doing the designs we have so far. So I think this is, I've now come to realize that this is why architecture is quite often profession of like old people, that like if done successfully, old both people but also old organizations can be very good in this profession, because they have over the decades accumulated in a way design capital or design potential, design ideas, and in a way skills, and also skills of like executing designs together that then can result in the right circumstances as something really, really good. So I think this is something we are really trying to now conserve in our office, and to kind of really be careful about not letting any of our key staff members go, and also to kind of to keep not forget about the kind of also the lost competitions and old things. Of course, to be inspired by other things as well. Maybe we try to not to be inspired too much by work of other architects, not even Mr. Aldo Rossi, but maybe inspired by arts, sports, politics, opinions of people, nature, and so maybe history and sociological things. Of course, the kind of particular context and assignment you're working on designs is the most important thing about what any project becomes. But then in a way what you do is you take the kind of assignment and then your own response to it, and our team's what the unique thing that Ala can bring to an assignment, then that has a lot to do with what we have done before. Not only for the technical things we know, but more for the kind of, in a way, this shared thinking that we have through the previous projects. So to illustrate that, I'll show some of the current things we are now actively day-to-day working. This is a very simple project in Lyon, France, so the kind of city of Lyon, a little bit outside of it actually. And the site plan says it also. We're in a university campus built in the 1960s as this kind of organic building system frame thing. That the idea of the architects at the time was that this university campus is built outside of the city, kind of liberated from the grids and the perimeter blocks and the old-fashioned nostalgic city, a kind of entity of its own that's built so that it can be infinitely flexible and always adjusted when the technology changes, and it can grow literally. And of course it was built in 1968 and hasn't been changed since. And it's both quite charming, but also then frustrating, because everything is on slightly different levels and the spaces are very fragmented, and there's no kind of modularity or systemic things, and it's hard to change anything. It's the complete opposite of flexibility that it was meant to be. But it's the campus of the university, and they obviously are happy to use it, but then they wanted to build a kind of library and learning center to complement this campus. And our analysis was that this time, instead of providing something a little bit complex as a contrast to the kind of two rational surroundings, which quite often is the case. It's almost the other way around, that the context and the rest of the campus is maybe too complex in a way, that what it could really benefit from is some simplicity. So we very simply suggested two levels, a kind of solid level, a little bit like in Audi, but this time resting firmly on ground with this concrete panel facade. Some bigger open panels showing where the doors are, that kind of sinks into the ground, and these are the kind of elevation changes that are happening everywhere in the campus. Everything is always a couple of steps different than the other, so you can't really move furniture around. You can't, you know, it's tough. So this the ground pedestal sinks into the topography, and then on top of it, we created a big open flat floor, open space to really kind of provide the university with their only place in the campus where there's actually a couple of thousand square meters of completely continuous horizontal surface, which will be used as a library and learning center, a kind of place where the students can, yes, borrow books, but more importantly, where they can kind of in an attractive surrounding study together, to do student projects together and do research together. And there's going to be a kind of flexible set of furniture that's easy to move around in this big horizontal, in again a little bit urban space looking in interior space, done with a fairly modest budget, so done with exposed timber structural system. That's not trying, there's no cladding. We're showing everything, also the ventilation pipes and everything will be shown, and then the structural system and the slight variation in the spans will create this kind of visually what I hope will be quite pleasant atmosphere to the interior, and also this kind of grand clear space where you can look into the distance, also through the glass wall into the surroundings and the Alps in the horizon. But more importantly, you can look at the internal landscape and kind of feel that there's hundreds of other students. You're not alone in the university. You're kind of a part of something bigger. You're kind of studying together, and it also has a potential to meet new friends and kind of team up, come up with a great student project together. And then, yes, have the books and the computers and the furniture to support that quest. And then in the lower level, we, like in Audi, there's the individual rooms. Rooms are there, some teaching spaces, office spaces, and book archives and so on, so that we don't have to have walls or rooms in the big open space. And you can see how the kind of open platform area continues from the existing outdoor spaces of the campus. Nothing fancy in a way, and a little bit almost like Mies van der Rohe's these universal campus buildings in IIT and so on, where there's always a solid pedestal where the rooms are, and then this pavilion on top. But this is, you know, connecting quite interestingly into the organic 60s buildings, and really the whole idea here is the kind of contrast it creates with the campus around it. And this is starting construction next year. It's been really interesting and partially quite tough, but also interesting experience working in France, and we're still finalizing the details and working drawings, and should get this built in a couple of years. So that's going to be interesting, and definitely I'm very optimistic that this will create a kind of fresh and easy to use landscape for thousands of students of this university. Then very quickly, we are doing this event space and hall to again harbor in a city in Kotka in eastern Finland. The building on the left is not our design, but it's our building is a very simple timber box, where one of the facades has been kind of twisted open, and then underneath this shape is the lobby. And then it's a multifunctional arena, which is sometimes used as a sports hall, sometimes as a convention space, sometimes for weddings or product presentations, a real kind of multifunctional hall for a small community. Again, trying to keep it playful and make it fun without making it ridiculous. So I think even though we are big fans of this American landscape and architecture team called Site, which was a big thing in the 70s and 80s, so there's maybe something from that. This is an example of a very everyday commission that we worked hard to turn into something a little bit beyond the norm. So it's a parking overground parking garage in one of the new residential areas. You can see the brick buildings are surrounding it, and this is like ceramic tile. So yeah, close to brick, but not really. And we kind of organized the parking garage so that in addition to just providing space for cars, there's also this kind of series of outdoor levels that connect through these ramps. So in a way, it becomes a usable rooftop that people can, jog around and use the top of the garage as almost like a public park or an exercise space, maybe in an otherwise very densely built part of town. And then we kind of continued the tilted angles from the ramps all around the facades in this with this ceramic rods to kind of create this zigzagging pattern that, depending on the light, looks quite fascinating for a garage at least. So here you can see the steps and the ramps going up the building, and also from the inside it's quite recognizable. We've also done a hotel, a very straightforward building, again, where the idea is to kind of complement, contrast, and play with the surroundings. So this time the surroundings is a huge congress center in Tampere, in one of the cities, and it's this kind of 80s complex with this maybe a little bit modest facade patterns and slight non-90-degree angles. And the commission was to design a hotel right next to it, so that there's an indoor connection. So we, after going through many options, realized that okay, what actually we should do is to make a very abstract hotel that almost visually blends in as part of the Tampere Hall Congress Center. So of course it's easy to see that it's a separate building, but we are repeating the same angles, and we use this concrete facade panel system that generates this 3D patterns that are maybe a little bit more vibrant and beautiful than the original patterns of Tampere Hall, but there's some similarity as well. Both are white and both are kind of large-scale abstract volumes. And so this time we didn't really want to make anything that jumps out too much, but kind of respects the 1980s white architecture of the original building. A lot of the local people have commented that they didn't even notice that there's a new building there. The kind of original building was so complex and sprawling that adding a huge hotel next to it, when done like this, went actually quite well. And the facade pattern reacts to different sunlight directions quite nicely. And it's a very normal, generic 4-star business hotel, which was a delightful commission as well to do. And for once, it was fun to do a building with some repetition as well. Not everything has to be like super complex and difficult. And then to kind of, I'm maybe 15 minutes over the given time, so not terrible. I'll finish up with showing one of the very recent things we are working now. So this is a tower building, something we always wanted to do in Estonia. So like I mentioned, the kind of sister city of Helsinki, and Tallinn, in Tallinn, Estonia, the capital. The sister city of Helsinki. There's a lot of daily commute from between these cities, and there was even a couple of years ago pretty theoretical tunnel project that this there would be an underground rail tunnel connecting these two cities. I don't think that will necessarily happen, but hopefully the boats will get more energy efficient and more ecological. And it's always a delight to take the trip south of the Baltic and see this beautiful city, which has a fascinating old medieval town with the church towers and spires here on the right. And here on the left, there's like this central business district, collection of fairly anonymous, mostly reflecting glass towers that were mostly built like right after the Estonian independence, after the 1991. And since then they are kind of in a way creating this group of buildings that now they have kind of limited the zoning, that there's a very kind of clear area where this tall building is allowed, and it's kind of has a certain distance from the old town. And yeah, it's and there's a possibility to build some couple of more towers, and we are designing one of them. So actually, if you look carefully here in the image, you can see these horizontal stripes, and that's our project. Seen from close, it looks like this. But this is an iconic view for somebody from Helsinki. We go to Tallinn a lot, and we come with the boat. We see the city from this, and then I've always looked at the kind of mirror glass towers and thought that okay, they are really, annoying in a way because they're very shapeless and very unrecognizable, and but there's a lot of kind of reflections and things going that sometimes it's great when something looks always a little bit different, but then when there's nothing that really defines any of these big volumes except that they are, there's a lot of square meters, a lot of investment, it's just money and the kind of brutality of modern life compared to then with the kind of what's now seen as really the kind of beautiful memories from historical times. Then when we got the opportunity to kind of propose a project here, we came up with the idea that it needs to have, the tower needs to have an architectural idea which also communicates like 1 kilometer away. It cannot be just like a shapeless glass tower, or also it cannot be just glass with some, tilting or things like this, because they're kind of shaping a glass tower, we can see from these examples, doesn't really do anything here. So we decided that let's use two different materials, that let's do these white solid stripes and then glass in between. And then by analyzing the program, we realized that the client is actually wants a hybrid building which has offices in the lower levels, then some small unit, almost hotel or hostel-like residential, and then once we go higher and higher, the apartments become, it's mostly a residential tower, the apartments get more and more luxurious. So there's some really amazing penthouse apartments at the top, and then really nice 100 square meter apartments, and getting smaller and smaller as we go down. So that quite easily kind of translated into a diagram where we actually have a very traditional modernistic stripe facade here. So like normal window height of 1.5 meters for the offices, and then it starts slowly, gradually becoming three-dimensional. Balconies are introduced, first quite narrow balconies with a railing, but then once we go up, the balconies become these big terraces, and the solid part, which in the bottom is the stripe facade. At the top, it has like step by step gradually turned into the kind of thin front edge of a large terrace. So then in the large landscape, this actually becomes a gradient of solid with then of course glass facade between the gradient, and something that's both elegant but also recognizable from a distance. And in a way, again, the idea is to stand in a contrast between the kind of what I feel are not so really well thought out glass towers in the neighborhood, and make something that's has its own character. It's not copied from anywhere. It's kind of, there's an invention, but the invention again is very local. It's really based on what the kind of combination of different functions here are. The pedestal building is a school. So it's a private business school which is developing this project. So it also links into that. So the kind of interesting functionality kind of has resulted in this sketch, which I feel has a lot of potential. Now have been working with the client for about 6 months with this, and it's developing very nicely. And we're developing different balcony systems for different levels. And the idea is that the kind of each floor is slightly different, so the kind of solid part gets narrower and narrower every time we go up one floor. It's about 105 meters tall, so it's not crazy, but like this kind of mid-rise tower, which is very interesting to do. And yeah, looking forward to hopefully getting this under construction in the coming few years as well. So this is that's a short presentation of what we've done and what we are doing at the moment. Maybe to conclude, just to kind of give you guys an idea what the architecture office of 50 people is doing. We are now currently sketching competitions or proposals for the following things. So we are sketching a concert hall. We are now in among 3 teams to do a new concert hall in Finland. That would be fascinating. Then we are bidding for a factory. The kind of we used to joke about that's one of the building types that we haven't really done. But then through a kind of slightly surprising turn of events, we are now being considered to be an architect of about 50,000 square meter factory. I cannot sadly tell you for which company, but it's a small country, you can guess. That would be fascinating to do a factory, of course. Then maybe even more surprising is that we're also like making a proposal to redesign and rebuild one of the local shopping malls. That's something that let's see if the client is really willing to go with us, but if they are, we are willing to make an effort to kind of find a way forward for what is now very traditional shopping landscape that's not really doing very well, as you can imagine, in this day and age. And then also we are competing against some really big global names in Thessaloniki in Greece for a congress center there, one of the big invited competitions. So we're doing traditional building types, in a way very traditional work of architecture, but as you hopefully saw from the examples, we are trying to do it not with gimmicks, but we are trying to provide maybe the way we see it, that we try to provide the client with an alternative sketch or something that they wouldn't get from any other office, and then if they prefer our idea, then hopefully we get to build it, and if everything goes well, it can become a huge success, like with the library. That's all. That's the lecture. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you're doing as well as you can during these strange times, and looking forward to getting closer to normal life over this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti, for the lecture, and I'm Igor Łysiuk, and it's my pleasure to host the traditional Q&A after our lectures. So I encourage all of our viewers to use this opportunity and ask Antti some tough questions on the project that he's presented us. But meanwhile, the first question I would like to start is about not any of the projects that you've presented here, rather it would be about the beginnings of your career, of your architectural path, because before the lecture we had a chance to chat a little bit about your times before ALA and the times when you were working in OMA in Rotterdam under the supervision of Rem Koolhaas. And it's interesting for us to, if you could tell us a bit how this experience shaped your architectural sensitivity and the way you approach architecture. How would you say, what was this influence on you from the times working in OMA?
Yeah, so I was young and I needed money, but I think a lot of people obviously overstate the kind of short experiences they've had in places like this. But I must say that for me, coming from a relatively small country and small town, that was even though Rotterdam is not a big city, but like OMA, and OMA wasn't a big office either. We were like 40 to 100 people during the 2 years I was there. From that, in many ways, a very modest office, I could see that, you know, that the whole world was there in terms of like the populations and the clients and the opportunities and thoughts, and that was really the kind of, you know, that the office stands for like for metropolitan architecture. So that's that was my introduction to what metropolitan actually means, and which was a good, helpful experience for a guy coming out of almost from the forest pretty much to the city. So like I developed an understanding of or started to develop an understanding what metropolitan means and can be, and what architecture's role in a kind of vibrant urban environment and culture can be. And of course developed a lot of friendships. So it was a big success for my life to be there for a while. And but it's a long time ago. But there's maybe, of course, working with 2 other Finnish architects, we each have to bring something to the table that's unique from. So that helped and has helped me personally. That I kind of through this slightly weird OMA experience, there's this kind of, it changed me a little bit. It made me different from my business partners, where we have very similar education from the Finnish architecture school system. So it's important that each of us we have our own ideas that are slightly different. And now over the last 15 years, we've of course merged to become almost like one person, but that's then a different story. So yeah.
I'm simply curious how it what pushed you or influenced you to try on your own, because well, architecture is a tough business basically, and I think that our audience is mostly students, and each of us is always wondering what career path to choose, and whether to try to pursue something on our own, or try to use the opportunities presented by bigger companies with bigger esteem and experience, and also possibilities. So that's why I'm interested in whether the time at OMA made an impression on you, that after the time at OMA you thought, well, I can try something on my own, and now I have this kind of experience I would need.
Yeah, I worked in different places after that as well to get more like technical experience and also to earn more money. But like to a certain I think from the beginning I was one of the architects who felt that if I'm gonna do this profession, I need to be kind of I need to be in charge to an extent, at least of the office. So now I'm obviously being in charge with Juho and Samuli. And that's great. And I think they also had the same mindset that they approached from the beginning the profession, so that we want our own studio, and we really kind of worked hard to get that. And it was because of like in the early 2000s when we started in Helsinki, the kind of there wasn't really great options of like making a career working for somebody else. The offices were really small, the salaries were really shitty, and the kind of working conditions were terrible. Nobody really understood how to use computers properly, and all the offices were run by like old people being nostalgic about the past, and the fixed pricing system that had collapsed. So the landscape was also clear from the beginning that in order to kind of there was demand for new offices started by our generation, and there have been several which have been quite successful besides us. And but yeah, it's not. I think OMA helped me to an extent to do it, among other things. But I think the motivation we shared from the beginning, and in a way, it requires some luck and some determination and some kind of persistence to kind of go for it. Of course, we've been in many ways lucky winning these open competitions, but we've also done a huge amount of competitions we haven't won. So there's the kind of, in a way, it's not a sport, but it has some elements of a kind of competition that you have to kind of analyze that what is in even some way possible, and then take some calculated risks, and then it's possible to do it. I would recommend if you're confident of becoming a good architect, and if you enjoy like designing, I think being able to set up on your own when you're about 30 or a little bit younger can be a really great thing. It's not as stressful as it maybe sounds. I've honestly enjoyed it a lot, and I think I was more stressed when I was working for somebody else. I think it's I come to work even though there's kind of strange things happening with the project sometimes and some pretty dramatic situations, it could be stressful, but it's much easier to handle the stress if it's your own project in a way. And of course, sharing everything with Juha and Samuli helps a lot. So I think, yeah, if I couldn't imagine doing this alone, but it's really like the kind of the problems and it's great that we can share the problems, it's even better that we can share the successes. It would be terrible to be kind of celebrating a prize alone, or like with just my non-architect family who are kind of they like me to talk about other things than architecture in the evenings or weekends. So it's kind of, yeah, I'm very lucky to kind of have a relationship with my business partners that really allows me and us to do this on such a kind of happy and quite successful level. So that's important as well. Find a team that you can really kind of rely on. There's going to be some ups and downs, so it's kind of try to find people who are kind of great to hang out with in the down parts as well. And yeah, that's what we managed to do, I think. It also, yeah.
Okay, we have a question right now from one of our viewers about, can you give an example of the dramatic situation that can occur?
Sure. I mean, for the projects are quite large, so you need in a busy moment of the project like this, you will have like 20 people working on it, and you maybe have a total of 40 people working, and 20 people are working on one project, and you know the money comes and goes to the salaries. It's like that's it. And then if you organize it properly, then you kind of in the end there's some money left. But so then you get into a lot of what about doing architecture is really kind of fitting in pieces which are kind of there's not a perfect solution. It's I maybe I don't like the word compromise, but you have to kind of find a balance, which and in a way make judgments that, okay, we can't do both of these, but we can do this part of that and then this part of that. And then sometimes some clients or some other stakeholders in the projects have maybe different motivations and different ideas about what's possible or what kind of balance should be found or what kind of compromises should be made. So then they will, in one way or another, kind of threaten to fire you or your team, unless you are just completely, doing what the client says. And as a good architect, you can't really just do that. You have to kind of, and quite often, even if you try to please the client. If the only goal is to please the client, even that sometimes is impossible because the kind of situations are just so that there are pieces which are impossible to fit together. So there's been, of course, some moments where you know that, okay, you're pushing for something or arguing for something or pushing for a solution that that might break the patience of the client, and then you have to find new work in one day for a lot of people, and it's or then tell them to find a new job, which is also terrible. And like I said, it's important to keep the team as intact as possible and learn together. So there's been, of course, some stressful moments where you know that, okay, I'm not gonna say yes, but if I keep saying no, we might get fired from the project, and then you have to kind of improvise as well. You don't know what's gonna happen. It's we've been and sometimes we get fired, not that often. It's typically very hard for the clients to change architects, and typically we try to stay on very friendly terms. We are very reasonable people, but yeah, there are these power struggles. I think that is the kind of most stressful part. So it's then yeah, in France there's like a lot of financial responsibility within the architect team, that you have to kind of control the costs quite a lot, which is fine. It makes perfect sense and it's a good system. But then you know, there's, as you all know from even at least from media, if you haven't worked before in this profession, that in these large building projects there are surprises which are very hard for anybody to predict or control. And then you know, that can be also, especially the more financial control of the project you have, and more financial responsibility the team has, then that can be quite stressful when you kind of realize that, okay, this doesn't work the way we anticipated, or this, you know, foundation has to be built differently and it's more expensive and so on. So that's these, you know, typical everyday things. But I've also found that it would maybe, for at least for me personally, I would be more stressed or worried if I was just in charge of one project. So if I was working for some other company, and I was, you know, technically like a project architect or project manager of a large project, then the worries of that project were all I would think about in my working life. Whereas now I can, you know, if I want to worry about something, I can select from a catalog of different problems from different countries, and it kind of balances out. You're not starting to obsess only about one thing. I've also seen, like, through our staff, that there are like very different personalities about, like, some people really want to focus only on one project for several years, and some people want to do something new almost every week. And a kind of healthy, good architecture office also kind of we try to find people kind of roles and responsibilities and projects that they are kind of naturally suited for. And of course, it's a lot of these things take a long time to design and build. So I think a very valuable team member for us, and I believe any architecture office, is somebody who's patient and you know, has this kind of mental ability to work on one project for a long time and kind of to slowly keep developing it and not get bored with it, but rather to kind of enjoy this gradual process of designing, and then the construction starts, and you know, it's the same thing and you go through the same things again and again, but you have to kind of keep the quality going, and then be really also smart about that. Some weeks or maybe even months of a long project can be kind of non-dramatic or nothing. It just goes, you know, it's like everyday work, but then there can be very critical moments at quite surprising times, and then a good team member here is like somebody who can kind of keep the project going, and then when there's like something important happening, to kind of react fast on that. So I think kind of this it depends, of course, on your mentality, whether running your own office or being a great project manager or being innovative interior designer for a small firm or something like that is something you want to do. So
okay. Yeah, I will have another question about the library in Helsinki, because you've described it using a couple of interesting phrases, like that some parts of it are randomly beautiful. It's a landscape of opportunities, and one thing that was interesting for me is that you've mentioned it being fun and experimental in a city in a context that was very traditional. And you said, if I understand correctly, that that maybe Helsinki weren't ready for a project like this before. And what, in your opinion, did something change in the city, maybe in its approach or its approach to architecture, that that made this kind of project, this kind of structure, this kind of aesthetics possible? Or and does it mean that in a similar way, this library is reflecting some societal changes that that occurred in Helsinki? How would you describe this this context and what it allowed in terms of the form and the end result of how this building looks like?
Yeah, that's there certainly are kind of forces that kind of made the building possible. Of course, it would have been physically possible to build something like this almost 100 years ago. It's of course we had the computers and so on, but like if you look at what Eero Saarinen did purely by drawing by hand, it's it's not that. But I think what the kind of what's really important with the library is that there was this kind of quite long and open public debate before the architecture competition began and before the kind of project was given any shape. That people were really discussing and suggesting, also, you know, without being asked or like without being made to party. Okay, that now we have a workshop about the new library, and please select 5 things you want to put in there. Not in this kind of coordinated way, but there was really a lot of like, in a way, public enthusiasm about this concept of building a new downtown library. And the name for the building, Keskustakirjasto, really, it's not the main library, but it's the kind of central city center library. That word combination sounds interesting and sounds like that there's some kind of contrast or contradiction, that the library, which sounds like a quiet and boring space, is combined with the kind of the noise and eventfulness of the city center. So in Finnish language, this kind of the word even sounds exciting. So there was a lot of discussion from the politicians and from, you know, people of Helsinki that what this building could be. And somehow so it wasn't just an identity project picked up by the mayor that, okay, now let's build something extravagant that we can put on this on the mayor's PowerPoint presentation about the city of Helsinki. But it didn't start from there, but it really started from a conversation that what a public building could be and what kind of public building we are missing from the city, and also the kind of role of the city that's changing from like shopping to something else, that people are not coming to the heart of Helsinki to shop so much anymore. They're coming, or used to come before the pandemic, of course, to kind of to the restaurants and cafes to meet other people. And then this kind of idea that, okay, we have this strong network of public buildings, but they're always for like a very particular purpose. There's the concert hall, the art museums, and so on, and on these smaller libraries, which are really for like the traditional library function. And then from like years of quite interesting conversation about it, really was like an open forum about what the city could be. From there, the kind of project emerged. So the kind of it's not only that the conditions made it possible, but somehow the project started to auto-generate itself because there was a need for it. There was this almost organic movement kind of behind it, which sounds almost too good to be true, but that really was the case. And then by the time the architecture competition was announced, people were really eagerly and also a little bit suspiciously waiting that, okay, we've been coming up together discussing this great idea about this new library, but then the architects will come and provide like a boring box and everybody will be disappointed and it will be very expensive to build and there will be some maintenance problems and blah, blah, blah. So then when our timber-clad swooping white glass gravity challenging project was published as the winner, I could at least sense by following the online forums and something I typically try not to do, but sometimes, it can be useful, that there was this kind of the public reaction. Of course, there's always something, it's shit, it's terrible, but like there was quite a lot of this that, okay, actually, so the architects didn't screw it up this time, but this also, that's the library. That's how it looks like. And there was something, the kind of path of curiosity that started way before the competition. It didn't, the competition didn't kind of kill the curiosity for the project, which happens quite a lot. But instead it kind of continued that, okay, that looks actually quite interesting. And is it really made of timber? And is it possible to build it out of wood with the wood facade? And okay, so much glass and what's inside? And what could we do inside that building? And where are the books and are there other things? And then, there was a good, very open design process where the kind of public was both part of it and then also very well informed how the kind of building is progressing. And of course, it was built right in the city center. So even the building site was interesting because people could see this strange steel structure coming up and this kind of constant conversation that what could happen there. So it's not only that the kind of change in culture, urban culture of Helsinki made the project viable, but it almost generated the project. So there's this kind of that's what the kind of really democratic city can do. And the mayor actually was very suspicious about the project, and the mayor at the time when the competition was done, he wasn't really in favor of it. But he realized very soon that, okay, there's such an overwhelming public support for the project that as a smart politician, he was like not really saying yes or no. Behind closed doors, he was actually kind of saying that it's too expensive and libraries are old-fashioned. And he was like very fiscally conservative mayor. Helsinki is a very, very wealthy city. So if Helsinki wants to invest in something smart, they definitely have the money. So, but then, so it really didn't come from top down, but from bottom up. And as architects, this was like we always had a lot of information and a lot of kind of honest opinion from the citizens that what they would want to do in the building, and then really kind of that was like the perfect inspiration and perfect toolkit to design the building. That there was like a list of hundreds of things that people want to do. Some of them really things that couldn't be done next to each other. So then we also, from that, we realized that, okay, we have to kind of, instead of just generating similar floors stacked on top of each other, we really needed to create different environments and different conditions where all these hundreds of different kinds of people and different kinds of events could happen. So that's I think that I feel is the key, and that's very hard to replicate. I mean, you might remember City of Helsinki tried to build a Guggenheim museum a couple of years ago. So this was then very top-down project, something that the mayor really wanted, and the mayor really wanted to kind of boost the global identity of Helsinki by strangely selecting the Guggenheim Foundation as the partner, and they organized the international design competition with a very short brief, which there was no public discussion beforehand. Public was not even informed very much about like what are we building this for, what are the art collections like. There was not kind of functional demand for this building or the functional concept or the kind of dreams of what there was. Nobody was talking about, yeah, what could we do with the Guggenheim Museum. People were more talking about like, why are we paying Guggenheim Foundation millions of euros to kind of lease the name, and also that we have quite a lot of art museums that are not that widely used. How will this be different? None of these questions were really answered. There was an architecture competition with 1,700 entries. Luckily, we didn't even participate because we kind of realized that this it's just too random. And you could, of course, design any shape and then say that this is the Guggenheim Art Museum, because there wasn't like a serious conversation about what that building really is about. So I think the kind of in order to do something maybe even slightly fun in architecture, there has to be very serious foundations and like very well thought out kind of basis need for the project. And you know, construction is, of course, it's a heavy thing. It takes a lot of effort to do a building like this, so it cannot be just like a quick thought, but like really result of like some serious thinking. So that's that I feel is the kind of critical part of that story.
Okay, now we have a question from our viewers here joining us on Zoom.
Hi, do you hear us, Antti?
Yes. Hello. Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, we would like to greet you from our place in Warsaw, from our Finnish house. So it's very interesting to hear you here inside little Finland space in Warsaw. My question is about sustainability. You mentioned climate crisis at the beginning of your lecture, and my question is about how you deal with sustainability solutions and all the stuff while designing and constructing your projects. What about the carbon footprint? What about renewable materials and energy and I don't know, water reuse and storage? Do you take it under consideration? We see that you use a lot of timber and CLT, and of course it's a renewable material. But what about other stuff connected with
Yes.
fighting the climate catastrophe?
Yeah, so I think it's not a choice anymore whether you take the kind of sustainability into account or not. It's like saying that whether you take the gravity into account or not. It's of course one of the really key aspects of any building activity is that first, of course, like maybe the most important step is to consider that what we are doing necessary. Do we need to build this building, or is it so any act of construction done even with the most perfect like processes and materials and technologies and renewable energy sources and so on is still a huge use of resources and materials and time and effort. So trying to really do things that are valuable and meaningful for a long time and that are maybe not always permanent but are going to be used for long and used by many people. I think that's really important. Of course, you could also think that doing a public building that's really durable, flexible, and well-functioning, that provides a lot of, maybe library visits, for example, then you have your footprint per library visit goes down, because if it's a very successful building, then with the same carbon footprint, you generate more visits. Or of course, you could then argue that no, it would be even better if you didn't build any nice buildings and people would just stay at home and maybe reduce their carbon footprints as well. So it's a little bit partially it's a question that what part of human activity do we even consider kind of worthwhile. then this 1 year exercise of doing almost nothing is of course interesting part of that. If you think of the airport design we are doing, are we then to blame for the kind of carbon emissions for people flying to holidays in Thailand or whatever, or is the architecture even contributing? That's complex, but I think definitely what we try to do is to do long-lasting things which are kind of really thought out so that they don't need to be constantly updated or rebuilt. They are easy to maintain, and then they are flexible in the ways that will certain functionalities will change. So then we try to make the building so that then the places where you need to change things are easy to change, and the kind of floor materials continue under the walls. So you don't have to you can move the wall or like demolish a light wall and build it somewhere else without doing like heavy modifications to other things. And also, yeah, aesthetically that the buildings are done so that they will be appreciated for a long time. I think the kind of, any construction you can think of like an investment, that you invest certain amount of natural resources into something, that it has to be a sustainable investment. Having said that, of course, I feel that the kind of where design plays a critical role is the energy expenditure of a building. So by selecting different not only materials but also the shapes and the layouts, the kind of geometries of the building can dramatically influence how much cooling, how much heating is needed, how much artificial lighting is needed. And so we try to balance that out with the rest of the kind of functional parameters. And definitely I think the culture in Finland is especially in the larger buildings where we are kind of what we are dealing with typically is that the buildings are very technology dependent. So there's a lot of mechanical systems keeping them running. That can be criticized to a certain event, but on the other hand, I think what I also see as a very positive move is that a lot of the mechanical systems are becoming more and more efficient and elaborate, and that's also something that a designer can play a role, is to kind of develop ventilation systems that are not ventilating or lighting or using energy on any spaces at times where it's not needed, and in a way kind of trying to help everybody realize where are the kind of active areas during which time of the year or time of the month, so on, and maybe even trying to configure the kind of building so that when it's naturally a little bit too hot, people are using the parts of the building that are easier to cool or things like this. It's of course very case specific. There's not like for a unique building you have to kind of look at it from multiple directions. I think there's some, of course, as you know, there are nice tools to analyze the energy situation, and I would say really that the kind of it's great if you can have solar panels on the roof or use timber as well. Of course, you should always use like sustainable materials, and also look into the kind of human side of sustainability, that not use materials like where the working conditions are terrible for people who have to deal with them, materials and so on. So consider those things, but then a really good design tool is really to just look at how much the building will use energy, and to see if by changing the facade, by adding shading, or by doing some physical changes or even functional changes, if you can reduce the energy usage. That's regardless of the solar panels, whether you have them or not, to kind of really try to push the kind of energy bill down. That's interesting, and that can be also quite inspiring for the kind of shapes and facade configurations and so on.
Okay, as we are almost out of time, I would like to ask one more question, and I would like to go back to the beginning of your lecture. You've mentioned Aldo Rossi and the way his works were maybe a little bit overlooked, unfashionable, and incomprehensible, as you described them at that time. And right now we are in a way reusing his ideas, his concepts. And could you similarly share with us some of the things that, some of the trends, some of the examples contemporary from now that, in your opinion, maybe we are overlooking right now, and in the next 20 years we will learn to reinvent them and reuse the ideas from today? What would you say?
That's it's maybe hard to say like a similarly. Of course, you could say that Peter Eisenman is super unfashionable right now, and maybe his work, or any of the New York 5 guys, maybe they will be more appreciated in 20 years time because of some cyclical trends. But then it's not really the same. I think if you think of like Zaha Hadid career from like a really fascinating avant-garde radical artist architect from the late 70s to becoming after her death this brand that's leased by like Chinese mega developments, and it's like, you know, literally like architecture without the architect anymore. It's in a way a kind of terrible story of what was really something that I really liked becoming something that's pretty terrible. And so it's hard maybe to see that having a similar, that never happened to Aldo Rossi's career. So it's a little bit different. And then also like the profession is so global now that I think if you think of like Zaha's ideas, the best execution of maybe them were done by the Chinese architecture offices, like MAD, this unbelievable like complex geometry opera houses and things that they've built in China, like much better than any of Zaha Hadid offices projects. That the things are kind of very fastly being reused and influencing things, and the kind of change of somebody does something and it becomes something else in the other side of the world. That's it's not the same situation anymore. So I can't kind of give you a famous architect name that is now, well, maybe Peter Eisenman is one option. I don't know. Of course, it's hard for me as a kind of 46-year-old guy to say that what you young people are now appreciating or not. So I'm maybe not. And yeah, also to an extent, of course, all these big historical names of architecture, they, in some ways, there's always a respect for them. But what I maybe tried to say with the Rossi thing, that and we are not, of course, yet back to the kind of fully postmodernist playfulness, even though that's always been part of that, has always existed in architecture, but it's not really. Let's see how much of that will reemerge in this kind of primitivistic aesthetic that's now quite strongly present. But what I felt that when I'm from the generation where computers really became like important design tools, and there was these manifestations that, okay, now we can free ourselves from these geometries, and of course like a lot of pretty embarrassing things were done and said about that. Okay, now we don't have to build anything rectangular anymore because with computers everything can be kind of blobby and strange. Okay, it didn't turn out to be completely like that, but there are now kind of possibilities with geometries and this kind of fluidity. That's the aesthetic of that felt so strong and so kind of futuristic and so powerful and so full of possibilities that I've never in a million years believed that in like 2021 we are like back to such a kind of strict and kind of rigid, yeah, maybe primitivistic is the right word for it, aesthetic, as as at least seems to be the case in Helsinki. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
our guest today was Antti Nousjoki, and thank you for the lecture. Thank you for very inspiring words and examples, and we will be back soon with next lectures. So I encourage all of you to follow our social media channels, and until then, we wish you all a pleasant evening and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.